Oh, we are finally recording. What a journey to get here. I just want to swear immediately, but I'm not going to. There's a lot of swearing before we got to this point. Hi, everyone. This is Melanie Yazzie, co host of Red Power Hour. We had technical difficulties, and it took us almost an hour and a half to get to this point where we could hit record. Anyway, Elena, would you like to just introduce yourself?
I'm Elena Ortiz calling in from Ogapoge, Owingay. And yes, it's been quite a journey. I think from like when both of us tried to figure out how we were going to watch this film that we're going to talk about today. And it involved some really stone age technology. Today we're going to talk about Powwow Highway, which was a film that came out in 1989. And it was one of the very first films that I considered using when I was writing my thesis on Native American images in popular film. And it came out in 1989. So I have a DVD. And when I met my husband, he had a DVD. So we had two DVDs, and then someone gave us a third DVD. But then I realized you can't stream it anywhere. So we had to watch it on the DVD player, which we had to dig up and then figure out if it would fit in, like plug into the TV. Anyway, it was a scene, and I understand, Melanie, you had a similar issue.
Indeed. I last night, because it was a busy week, I was like, oh shit, I need to watch Powwow Highway, to prep for our recording tomorrow. So I was like, I could like you can always buy movies on like Prime or Apple TV. No, you could not buy this movie anywhere. You couldn't stream it for free anywhere. And I was like, fuck, like I'm gonna be so unprepared. I feel really bad. And then I just had this light bulb moment and I was like, I think I own this movie. I was like, I think I own this movie on DVD. So I purged all of my DVDs like years ago because they're basically obsolete. But I have like five and they're all native movies. And I own Powwow Highway. And I was like, oh, I own Powwow Highway. And so I got really excited. But then I was like, I don't own anything to play this on anymore. Cause I think I purged my last like CD or DVD player 7, 8 years ago or something. So then this morning, I freaked out again and I had to go find a place physically that would sell a CD or a DVD player, which was Best Buy. So then I had to go there and then I had to buy one and then I had to come back and then I could watch it. And so, yeah. And then whatever was happening, I think RPH is like a little cursed, a little bit. Because every time we record, like literally every time we record, there's always some like weird tech issue that takes a really long time to get through. When we have a guest, they always have problems. Like today, I think we created 4 different studios to record this. And then we had to join and rejoin like a dozen times. And it's truly almost an hour and a half later, and we're finally recording. So I don't know, whatever is working against us, pa pa pa. You shall not stop
Pew
us.
pew, pew pew, pew pew. You will not defeat the native women
No,
because we will triumph no matter what.
seriously. I will drive fucking 10 miles to a Best Buy to get a DVD player in order to make this shit happen. So,
That's right. That's right.
I
But it
actually,
just go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say I actually needed a CD slash DVD player because I recently went to the Gallup flea market and bought some CDs of like traditional Navajo songs that I'm trying to learn, but they were all burned on CDs because like people who live on the res still listen to CDs and like burn things on CDs instead of like USB drives, and so I was like super excited to get that. So that happened in August, and I came home and I was like, I'm gonna listen to this, and then I was like, fuck, I don't have anything to listen to this on. Even the CD player in my car doesn't work anymore. Anyway, so I
Yep.
needed one. It's fine. I freaked out, but it's useful. So that's my
Yeah.
story.
It is. I mean, we actually have a DVD player,
Nice.
or yeah, a DVD. I don't think we have a CD player. We have a DVD player, because we still have a lot of older movies on DVD that you can't get anymore. And obviously Powwow Highway is one of them. Um, but it is really a very classic Native movie.
Hmm.
And when it came out in 1989, I had committed to writing this thesis on Native American images in popular film, and started with like the John Wayne. I started with Cheyenne Autumn and the Searchers, and was talking about, obviously negative images and the John Wayne, John Ford movies, which are so bad. And then I hit on this, and it was like a breath of fresh air, like
Hmm.
literally, um, wow, this movie is positive and it's nuanced, and the narrative, for the most part, belongs to Native people,
Hmm.
but the characters were really good. I mean, there are some that are I think less good than others. But I mean, there's more caricatures, and there's some caricatures which I really love. Which one of them, of course, is Rabbit. I love Rabbit because, oh my God, how many rabbits have I known in my life from Texas who dress like that and talk like that, and just love me some Rabbit. But anyway, here we
Yes.
are.
Yep.
We've got Powwow Highway on the brain.
Yes. I watched it. Um, I had watched Powwow Highway once before. I genuinely cannot remember when that was. I think I might have been a teenager or it might have been in college. Either way, it was at least 25 years ago. And I do recall when I did watch it, I was maybe like multitasking or something. And so I actually didn't remember the film at all. So, for all intents and purposes, this was my first time really watching it attentively. And I can't believe it took me this long to watch this, since it's such like a classic, almost kind of like an OG film in so many ways, so many ways in terms of like the actors who make cameos and have small parts. This is obviously Gary Farmer's first role, or it might not have been his first role, but it was for his first like main role. Um, and is like the narrative about masculinity kind of gets played out again in like Smoke Signals. There's a lot of like things from Smoke Signals that felt kind of derivative, to be honest, from Powwow Highway, that I had kind of like not ever made that connection in my mind because I just didn't remember watching Powwow Highway, but I remember Smoke Signals vividly. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. I really liked Powwow Highway. There are actually parts of it that I got kind of emotional. And what I liked about Powwow Highway was like Gary Farmer's character, Filbert. I think his name is Filbert. And just how he plays Filbert and like the journey that Filbert goes on in the film. There's something really beautiful about it. And very touching, actually. And so yeah, Gary Farmer's character was like hands down my favorite character. And then also how Gary Farmer played that character was really, it might be my very favorite Gary Farmer role ever. It was his first big role to date. And if folks don't know who Gary Farmer is, he's a Cayuga actor, kind of a legend in Native film, along with folks like Wes Studi and the late Graham Greene, the recently late Graham Greene, who we're going to talk about a little bit later in a retrospective in this episode.
Yeah, Gary Farmer, hands down, is the one you want to watch in this. And I love Filbert, and I've always loved Filbert. And in our house, my husband and I had watched this film before we met, and we watched it, together, and obviously we owned it, several copies. And then I watched it with my kiddo, and in our house, like, my husband's truck has always been War Pony,
Is
and
it because of this
Gary
movie?
Farmer. Oh, heck yeah!
Aw.
It was always, now in the film. Gary Farmer's car, Filbert's car, is Protector, the War Pony, but
Aw.
we were always just every truck we had is up. Where's War Pony? So it's become sort of part. It's canonical in a way.
No, it is.
Um, and we've also always whenever anyone in conversation says Pine Ridge, we always say powwow because of that exchange when Filbert um, hears someone say powwow Pine Ridge, he says Pine Ridge powwow, and yeah, so it's one of those. It is a very canonical, and it's an interesting film because I remember back in 1990 or 91 when I was writing my thesis, and someone said to me, I had watched the movie several times, and someone said, "Yeah, isn't it interesting that it was the British that actually made the best Native American film to date?" And I thought, wait a minute, this was a British film, and it's true. So George Harrison actually produced this film.
A beetle?
So yeah, a Beatle produced this film.
Yeah, I noticed
Um,
that. I was like, what?
yeah, interesting. And then the other thing that's so Filbert for sure, and then we can talk about Buddy Redbow, which kind of um, is interesting, and I'm not sure the person who wrote the novel Powwow Highway is gone, and so I don't know what his relationship was to. There was a person named Buddy Redbow who was a Lakota sort of uh, singer songwriter, not sort of.
Hmm.
He was a singer songwriter.
Hmm.
I'm going to say sort of country music.
Yeah,
That's kind
it's
of what Buddy played,
quite
and
well
and
known.
he used to, yeah, he was very well known, and he used to come to Santa Fe all the time when I was younger and play back in the days when I actually went out at night. Um, and so I got to be kind of friends with him and friends with a lot of people who were around him at the time. Um, John Trudell, would come into to Santa Fe and play. Um, and there was a group of people, and I remember when Buddy died, it was very sad, and a group of us went up to his funeral. But I don't know if the writer of this had that Buddy in mind or not. But like all of the OGs are in this film.
Yeah.
The very beginning, the very beginning of the film, you see a warrior on horseback carrying a lance, and that's Rodney Grant, who of course became wind in his hair from Dances with Wolves. And then he played Crazy Horse in Son of the Morning Star, and some other things. And then right away you see John Trudell and you see Wes Studi. So all of the OGs are in this film, and given how long ago it was, it's understandable. But this was sort of like the first film that you see where the narrative is actually retained by the native characters.
Sorry, Winston, is Rodney Grant the one who's been accused of like human trafficking?
No, that was Nathan
Smiles a
Nathan
lot.
Chase.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
yeah,
I retract that. Okay, okay, okay. I was completely confused.
yeah. He was
Okay.
a young guy in Dances with Wolves.
Okay, okay, okay.
Rodney played Rodney played the wind in his hair, the one who became friends with Kevin Costner's character, and and he did some other stuff. Like Son of the Morning Star was one of them, and I can't remember what else. He's kind of disappeared. Or anyway, I haven't seen him in anything recently. But
Okay.
the ones who really have, the ones who really lasted, of course, Graham Greene, phenomenal. But Wes Studi, OG, John Trudell, of course, is gone. But yeah, a lot of these people have just been around and been in the film industry for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting about this film. 1989 is a long time ago. It's a long time ago in the history of film. And I found watching it today, literally this morning, um, I was like, damn, this is a better movie about like native people and like native experience than a lot of the shit that comes out today. Like the Taylor Sheridan verse, you know, that we're super critical of here on RPH, or like the Yellowstone world or whatever. And so I if people haven't watched it or heard of it, I would really recommend you go find a DVD of Powwow Highway somewhere and you buy yourself a DVD player and you watch this, because I don't know, it has a lot of themes in it, I think, that are really important. You know, that opening scene that you were referencing, Elena, they're in like what I think looks like maybe like an Indian bar or maybe like a border town bar. There's a bunch of native people there, and Buddy Redbow, who's played by A. Martinez, who I frankly didn't remember who that was, but don't know if that person's native. It seems possible. Um, but he plays Buddy Redbow, and he's like playing pool. He's shooting pool, and like some other native bros are there. This takes place in Northern Cheyenne Reservation in Montana, by the way. Well, it begins there. And so Buddy Redbow is Northern Cheyenne. Philbert, played by Gary Farmer, is Northern Cheyenne. And so they're in this pool hall or this bar. Wes Studi and John Trudell play kind of like the peanut gallery, like his friends. They have like funny lines, but very in the background. And as Buddy Redbow is shooting pool, there's all these cool things he says. This is the opening scene of the movie. So he shoots, um, he sinks a ball, into a pocket, and he says, the first one he says is, there goes the man at the White House, right? He's like, boom, taking out the man at the White House. And then he says, and that's the Swinomish pipeline. And that's the coal mine at Big Mountain, referencing Black Mesa in the Navajo Nation. And then there's another one where he says that's the monstrosity out on 314. And Northern Cheyenne is like heavily mined, particularly for coal. And so, like, the very first thing that sets up the film is this kind of like narrative of resistance against resource extraction, basically, and like mega development on reservation lands. And you find out that Buddy works for the tribal government, the Northern Cheyenne tribal government. Um, he steals money from them in order to go on this trip with Philbert, and he's kind of an asshole. Like, Buddy Redbow is like a jerk, and you don't ever understand why he's such a jerk, because you also find out throughout the film that he was at the like Wounded Knee, and he's like an AIM. Maybe he was a member of the American Indian movement, or definitely a Red Power activist, a Vietnam vet, from what I remember and understand. So he's like kind of understood as this radical and this militant. And you find out that he ends up going on this journey with Philbert to Santa Fe, New Mexico, because his sister, Bonnie Redbow, who's played by Janelle Romero, that's correct, that's her name, Janelle Romero, um, has been set up by the cops. They find a bunch of, it looked like weed, I think, or just drugs in the trunk of her car, and she's arrested. She's been arrested in New Mexico. And so she calls Buddy, and they apparently haven't seen each other in a decade. And she's like, hey, can you come help me? Because she has 2 kids. And so what happens is that Buddy borrows some money from the tribal government, and he asks Philbert, who has this new car, the War Pony, Protector the War Pony. He's procured this, just like this res rocket. It's like the most busted ass hoopty. I'm surprised it made it to New Mexico without completely falling apart. So he basically like convinces Philbert to take him from Northern Cheyenne, or like Lame Deer, Montana, down
Yeah.
to Santa Fe, New Mexico, to go help Bonnie with her legal issues. And so that's basically the plot of the movie, is their journey together. And so you find out that Bonnie has been set up by the FBI in order to get Buddy off of the reservation, so that there's like a new mine, I'm assuming a coal mine, that is going to be voted on by the tribal council then that week or something. And so you find out that the FBI is in cahoots with the mine, or the corporation, the mining corporation, to keep Buddy away from the res, because he's like vehemently opposed, obviously, to the mine. There's like the scene also kind of at the beginning of the film where he takes on the mining rep, who's presenting, all of like the opportunity and like the employment and things that are the boon, that this mine is going to bring to the community. So yeah, they basically use his sister to drive him away, or to draw him away from the reservation, so the vote can go smoothly without any kind of resistance from him, so that this mine can like set up operations. And so you find out like the FBI is working in relationship with the corporation to make sure that this happens. So that's like the basic plot of the film. But yeah, Buddy's character is supposed to be kind of like the AIM militant kind of character. I'm I
Yeah, he
think
makes
I think
reference
people.
at one point.
I wasn't a fan of how his character
Yeah,
was portrayed.
he makes, and it's kind of one dimensional because
Yeah.
um the the folks who were at Wounded Knee, they all knew each other. They came from the same place. They all knew each other, and he makes some reference um, to the bunker. He comes into contact with that guy who. First of all, let me back up. There's a great scene in the council chambers
Hmm.
where the rep for the mining company is talking about how wonderful this is going to be for the tribe, opportunities and jobs and all of this, and and Buddy jumps in and he says, since you've, whatever the corporation was called, since you've been on the reservation, um, unemployment has gone up to, and I'm making this up, but like 70%. And, just basically spewing out a bunch of data that proves that whatever this guy is saying is incorrect. And then he says, this here is not America. This here's the third world. And I remember that line. I've always remembered that line because it's true, especially in places like Lame Deer, Pine Ridge, Crow Agency, all of those places that have this huge amount of resource extraction and have yet to see any benefits for any of the tribal citizens. And so you immediately know who Buddy is through that scene. Then when they get to Pine Ridge and they go to this powwow, um, they pick up his friend Wolftooth, who was at Wounded Knee with him, who was in Vietnam with him, and they've obviously been brothers in arms. And he says he's leaving Pine Ridge because his machine shop was destroyed by this person, and then they run into this person at the powwow, and he's kind of like a Dickie Wilson goon, sort of, uh, pro extractive industries, pro um, everything that comes into the res and just takes and takes and takes and doesn't give, and anti-traditionalist, and definitely anti-aim. And so he and Buddy have words, and you just get this sense that this is a whole cohort of people who've all known each other for years on opposite sides. But you don't really get any sense of a characterization of Buddy other than this, like, very, it's such a trope, such a stereotype, the angry young Indian, and that's what he is. So yeah, not a fan.
Yeah, he's just so angry, like about like everything sets him off. He's incredibly cruel to Filbert. He says really mean things. He like breaks stuff. He's just a jerk throughout the film, and there's no explanation for why. At one point, so the way that they make it to Pine Ridge is, so Filbert's character, that's Buddy's narrative arc. But Filbert's narrative arc is actually quite lovely. Filbert was bullied. There are like flashbacks, and you find that Filbert was bullied by Buddy when they were children, but you get the sense that he was bullied by a lot of kids when he was young. And so Filbert is like he's kind of like this tender, maybe slightly eccentric loner, is kind of the sense that you get. And at the beginning of the film, you see him go to, I don't know, some place that has a bunch of rundown, busted up cars, and he trades like some liquor and like a few dollars for, this res rocket that they end up driving to Santa Fe, New Mexico. War pony, protect the war pony. And so Filbert's like on a quest, essentially, to be a warrior. And he's like, okay, so I need to collect these like four, kind of like these four tokens from, the ancestors on my path towards becoming a warrior. He has like a name, and he's on this, like, genuinely on this journey, to become a warrior. And of course, he needs his trusted war pony protector to be with him. And so, they have started the journey from Lame Deer down to Santa Fe, and there's like, you can turn on I-25 south to Denver. They're probably like in Wyoming at this point, or you can take like I-90 east to Rapid City. And so Buddy's asleep in the passenger seat. And so they buy a CB earlier on. And what was his name? Something Wind, Slow Wind.
Whirlwind Dreamer.
Whirlwind Dreamer is his warrior name. But he encounters this native trucker, this Lakota trucker on the CB. And the Lakota trucker tells him, like, oh, man, you got to go to this place. Like, if that's where if you're on this journey, like, this is the most holy place, the most sacred place, possibly in the entire United States. And I think it's supposed to be Bear Butte, but it's named like Sweet Butte or something like that in the film.
Yeah.
Because when they pull up, I'm like, oh, that's Bear Butte, right, in the Black Hills. And so, of course, like, Filbert just takes a detour east, to Bear Butte, and then he like hikes up to the top and leaves his Hershey bar as an offering. And he comes
Which is
back
the
down.
sweetest.
It was so
Yeah.
sweet
Sweetest
because he's
thing.
going to eat. This is what I'm saying. This is why I love that character. He gets up to the top
Yeah.
and he's kind of like hungry because it's a bit of a hike, and he's about to like chomp down on his chocolate. And then he kind of looks around at all the prayer ties and the tobacco ties around him, and he's like, oh, I shouldn't do this. So then he like carefully wraps it back up, and then he like gently puts it on a rock as like an offering, to the spirits. And then he comes back down. And there's just all of these like moments throughout the film where how Gary Farmer plays this character of Filbert. Filbert has these like, he says these things, like he has this like, he's obviously like tapped in, to the spiritual realm, and he's on this journey to become a warrior. And Buddy makes fun of him, like everyone's making fun of him, and is like incredibly cynical. They're like, this is bullshit, like, why are you doing this? No one is supporting him on this journey to become a warrior. And he just persists anyway. And he, in fact, becomes a warrior because he breaks Bonnie out of jail. Like, he actually, they pass through Fort Robinson in Nebraska, which I had to look this up a little bit for the history, but this is where, like, several Cheyenne, ancestors were massacred because they broke out, because they escaped, custody by the army after they were forcibly removed. And so so you think, you're like, oh, and then there are these moments through Filbert's eyes that kind of go back in history to like probably the 19th century and then to today. And so he's kind of moving like temporally between like these spaces, and you get the sense that like the ancestors are communicating with him too. And so I think that's where this like idea in his mind is born. It's very like subtle in the film, of like breaking Bonnie out of jail in New Mexico. And like that's his quintessential warrior moment. Like that's how he supports the people. And also, Bonnie was really kind to him when he was a child and everyone else was being mean to him. So he obviously has like a tender spot in his heart for her. And so he does actually become a warrior through the act of like helping Buddy help his sister Bonnie. He becomes a warrior for the people. And then Protector the War Pony helps him and perishes in the end, but nevertheless, like, yeah, it's, I don't know. It's actually kind of a lovely arc for
Yeah.
Filbert. But anyway, the way they end up in Pine Ridge is Filbert's just like, yeah, we're gonna go to Bear Butte. And then there's some Lakotas sitting there kind of like, I don't know, giving each other hickeys or whatever. The base of Bear Butte. And they're like, hey, there's a Christmas powwow down in Pine Ridge. And then they end up in Pine Ridge. And that's how they kind of take the detour through Lakota country and then head south through Nebraska and encounter Fort Robinson. But yeah. And that's where Buddy meets up with his old comrade or whatever, his relative, who's at the standoff at Wounded Knee. And that's where you encounter Graham Greene. I think it was maybe his first ever role ever.
It was definitely the first one that I saw him in that I remember. because it's such a pivotal moment. Buddy, the angry young Indian, and these goons that he encounters, and Wolftooth goes up
Wolf tooth.
to sort of defend him, and then they're getting into a fight, and you think there's going to be a big brawl, and all of a sudden this knife comes flying through the air and hits the backboard, and Buddy's like, yeah, who threw that? Who threw that? Then he looks up into the bleachers, into the stands, and it's Graham Greene, who you get the sense that they served together in Vietnam, and Wolftooth tells Filbert that the Graham Greene character had been captured by the Viet Cong and held for, I think he said 31 months in a tiger cage, and then escaped and had to slit 3 throats. And then you see Buddy go up into the bleachers to see him, and he's just a mess. He's clearly heavily PTSD, and then he tells Buddy to dance, and Buddy says no. He says, I don't dance. You this is all bullshit. You put these people think a few beads and feathers is a culture, and the Graham Greene character says to him, you got mean.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that was huge. That was like, to me, a turning point in that character. You got mean. And then Buddy goes down, and he actually dances, and Filbert is there drumming because, and he's happy as he can be, because that's where he wanted to be. But it's an amazing scene. And I remember thinking to myself, who the heck is this guy? Like, that actor was phenomenal. And he was only on screen for like 2 minutes, but you just got the sense that this guy was powerful, that he was an amazing actor. Yeah, and gotta love that Graham Greene.
Yeah, I agree.
And then after that, you do, so Buddy is still an asshole. He gives his friend grief for leaving Pine Ridge, and Wolftooth says, there's a shooting a night in Pine Ridge, and so you're just giving up. You're going to go and be bougie and in Santa Fe and blah blah blah. And Wolftooth says, I have a child on the way. The fight is going to continue whether I'm here or not. And he says to Buddy, if you want to fight, if you want to fight every day, you come live at Pine Ridge. And then that's when they arrive in no, actually he goes to Denver. Yeah. Wolftooth goes to Denver, but I say it's Santa Fe because it actually was Santa Fe.
I know. I saw that. I was like, that's Santa Fe.
Because you can see the mountains, you can see the snow on the mountains. I'm like, oh yeah, that's Santa Fe. That's not Denver, but it's supposed to be Denver. But then after the powwow scene, and after they drop off Wolftooth and his wife, there's sort of a subtle change in Buddy, where Filbert goes out into the water. They stop, and they're and he goes out into the water, and he starts singing. And Buddy, no, that's actually before they pick up Wolftooth. But you see Buddy starting to change. He starts to sort of empathize with Filbert, or at least support Filbert, or become a little bit more understanding of Filbert, because he goes out there into the water and he starts singing with him. And then as they continue on through Denver and through and into Santa Fe, you see Buddy's attitude towards Filbert change a little bit. It's very subtle, but you do see it. Filbert manages to break Bonnie out of jail because he saw it on an old Western he was watching. He was watching that old Western, and they pulled the the jail bars out. They pull they basically pulled the bars out and the wall came with it, and that's how he manages to rescue Bonnie.
Hmm. With her kids in the car with him. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So what I kind of got from the film, you're talking about how Buddy, there's like some subtle shifts in his character as they are on their journey, and he starts to kind of like he's like less mean to Phil. Well, he's not really less mean to Filbert. He kind of starts to participate, like when they're singing in the river, like a traditional Cheyenne song from whatever. I mean, at least that would be my understanding. I don't really know, but you're basically seeing like two different versions of a warrior, or like what a warrior is, and of course, like the snapshot of Graham Greene, even though he's like only on screen for a couple of minutes, warriors that are actual veterans of Vietnam, warriors of Wounded Knee, warriors of old, right? Because Filbert is like communicating or being given messages by warriors of old, like Rodney Grant's character is like a vision or whatever, right? An ancestor from the past, and a warrior ancestor from the past. And of course, Filbert himself is on a quest, a warrior quest, a quest to be a warrior. So it's like, it's an interesting, there are a lot of these native movies, and we've reviewed quite a few of them at this point, that have this commentary again on masculinity. Um, Probably the most popular movies in like native film are about masculinity and like the journey of native men. And I guess again, I don't entirely know how I feel about that. But this movie definitely is like an OG, I would say, in that regard, simply because it came out first. Um, but it does at least give you a snapshot or some sort of interesting commentary about kind of like these different approaches to masculinity. Of course, you have like Buddy, who is just really angry, just like an angry bro. Um, I You see that maybe something happened to him. Maybe he used to be different when he was like young and political, but he's become bitter and political because like nothing changes, or I don't know. Like it's actually just not explained, frankly. It's just not explained, which is why his character was very unsatisfying for me as somebody who engages in those politics. But Filbert, yeah, Filbert is. There's this point where when did this happen? They're at the base of Bear Butte after Filbert has gone up to give his offering, his Hershey bar offering, and Buddy kind of like lunges at him and is like super pissed off about the fact that because he's just woken up. It's the morning. He fell asleep. He thought they were like in Denver or something, and he's like pissed off that they took this detour into South Dakota. Filbert is much bigger than Buddy, by the way. He has like about 250 pounds on him or something. But Filbert finally just like grabs Buddy, and what does he say? He's like, no one will ever grab me again, or like no one will ever attack me again. And he has this look in his eye, and you can tell that he's like being transformed by this journey and this quest as a warrior. And he's also like, once they get to Santa Fe, he kind of like, Bonnie's children really love him because Buddy's their actual uncle, like by blood. But Filbert makes them feel safer and more protected. And so this is kind of like why I like Filbert's character. He's extremely gentle. He's wise. He says things like, warriors collect medicine. Like, we collect medicine. This is what we do. And he says at one point, what does he say? Buddy's like, I don't know, saying some dumb thing where he's just getting angry about something. And then Filbert explains to him, like, we are gathering power. He says that at one point as they're kind of making their way to Santa Fe. And he's like, we are gathering power. And so, yeah, Filbert's character is like, I think, a version of Indigenous masculinity or a commentary on it that was so much, it was just rich. I think it was rich, possibly more so than most portrayals I've seen. And even though that character was written by a non-native person, I truly believe like it was Gary Farmer who brought that nuance to that character. And yeah, I think to date, you don't really see even today like really nuanced kind of understandings of Indigenous masculinity in film, like in Native film. So it's a very unique, I would say.
I agree. It seeing that after watching that one episode of Res Dogs where
Mm.
they take cheese out
Oh,
into
cheese.
the uncles.
He reminds me of
Yeah,
cheese.
yeah. They take cheese out into the woods to go fishing,
Yes.
and Gary Farmer is there, and it's that same Filbert character,
You're
and he's very
right.
gentle, but he reminds us too that a warrior's first responsibility is defense,
Mm.
and it's defending the people, it's defending the elders and the women and the children and the community, and that's what a warrior is. And Buddy thinks he's a warrior, but he's really one-sided. He's fighting to prevent resource extraction. And it's interesting because from the very first scene where Buddy and Filbert leave in Protector of the War Pony, that this and you know, Lame Deer is beautiful. I mean, there are places around Lame Deer which are just gorgeous. But what you see when they're on the road, and this is a road movie, um, what you see when they're on the road is just the wasteland left over after extraction.
Yep.
And it's meant to be that way because then after they pick up Wolftooth and his family, they stop for a picnic lunch, and there's a picnic table, and in the background is a processing plant. And I don't know what it was, whether it's gas or something, but all that you see along the way is the devastation wreaked by extractive industries. And they're there, and there's this processing station in the back, or this power station or something, and Filbert is telling a story, and he's
That's
talking
right.
about the trickster, and he tells this beautiful story, and then um, he says, you know, the moral of the story, or the ending of the story, is that the trickster is chasing shadows when the truth hangs above his head.
Hmm.
And Buddy makes some comment about, you know, stories, and Filbert says it's the same. It's the same as it is today. These are the lessons that we should be carrying with us today. And it's just beautiful the way he's able to bring that in without making it seem trite.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, whereas Buddy is so one-sided, just one-dimensional, Filbert is very nuanced, and I do believe that that a lot of that is the acting. Like you, I don't necessarily think that the character was written with that much nuance. I think Gary Farmer brought that much nuance into it.
Hmm. So maybe it's kind of like, obviously they're, it's not just, I mean, obviously like Buddy and Filbert are the two main kind of understandings of what a warrior is, but there are these other like male characters, like Graham Greene's character, who just comes in momentarily. Wolftooth, I think, is another kind of window into a different kind of masculinity associated with warriorship, because obviously he's like a veteran aimster, he's a veteran red power person, he's like been in the struggle, and he and his wife are deciding to leave Pine Ridge because of the violence, and they're still being targeted for like their political participation and red power activism, and she's pregnant. And of course, like you said earlier, Buddy gives him shit, gives Wolftooth shit for leaving. He's like selling out, you know, and going and living in his comfy condo life in Denver or whatever. And Wolftooth is just kind of like, wait, hold on, man. Like, I have a child on the way. I can't just like be in this violent environment where like we're always fighting all the time. And so like fatherhood, right? And like the
Yeah.
responsibilities of family, and how that could also be another arena in which we might understand like warriorhood or warriorship. I think is also in the film, even though it's like definitely not a main theme. And so you just see like all of these different, again, I feel like very nuanced kind of approaches to what and who a warrior is, like a native warrior, like a man, particularly a man. And then you have Buddy just like constantly coming up against every single time there's like a nuanced thing, whether it's coming from Filbert or coming from Wolftooth or coming from Graham Greene's character, who doesn't, I think, isn't named in the credits. It was just Vietnam vet was the name of his
Yeah.
character. Um, and Buddy's just like so cynical and so bitter and just rejects all of it. He's like, culture is bullshit, prayer is bullshit, everything is bullshit. and, and so, yeah, what is that saying? It's like when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I
Yeah.
guess I understand that, but then there's no explanation for why he has become this way. Because, I mean, Wolftooth isn't like that. Wolftooth isn't an
Right.
asshole. And he comes from like the
Right.
same political lineage. I come from a very similar political lineage, at least like a 20th century version, 21st century version of Red Power. And like, I'm not like that. You know, I haven't just like decided that everything is complete bullshit. He's almost like a nihilist. And I'm not really sure why, other than maybe the whole point of the movie is to kind of like demonstrate how
Yeah, to
to just
juxtapose those two characters.
that's what I'm trying to say. It's just trying to juxtapose. It's almost like Buddy's just like there as like a narrative device for Filbert's character. That's kind of how it
Yeah.
feels. Even though Buddy is the main character of the film, which doesn't make any sense to me. But yeah,
I always thought Filbert was the main character. And then the other character that you have, which is kind of um, which is another version, is the chief. So the chief of the Northern Cheyenne, who basically acts sort of as Buddy's mentor, but the John Trudell character, right after Buddy leaves, he has the money to go buy bulls. He's supposed to go buy bulls. And the John Trudell character says, he's taken that money and gone on a drunk. You won't see him till the money runs out. And the chief says, you leave Buddy alone. He just does that. He has his own way of doing things. And so he's defending Buddy. At the same time, he shows up in Santa Fe because he's smart. He knows something is up, and so he shows up in Santa Fe, and he's going to go and meet with Bonnie, who's in the Santa Fe jail, and then he sees Filbert, and he sees Filbert breaking her out, and so he doesn't talk to them. He doesn't, approach them or anything. He kind of just sits back and like the smile on his face when he sees Filbert in that car in Protector of the War Pony, breaking Bonnie out of jail. He just gets this big smile on his face, and it's like, oh, and he watches and he observes, and he's sort of there as a backup, but he never inserts himself. And then when Buddy, and there's a moment too on it's actually filmed on the Santa Fe Plaza, where they've got Rabbit and Bonnie and the two kids, and Filbert and the cops are right behind them, and Buddy pulls the window out of the driver's side and tells Filbert to keep driving, and he leaps up in the air, and he's got this pane of glass, and he just magically turns into this warrior, and he hurls the glass, and the car flips over on its side, and then he jumps into Protector, and they get away, and they head for the hills. You see the chief right behind them, like he's there, he's supporting, he's protecting, but he's not involved in it at all until Protector the War Pony dies, and then the chief is there to pick them up. So that's sort of a different example of that masculinity. That's the elder, the statesman, the I don't know what else you would say. The elder, the
yeah.
chief, the wisdom keeper.
I mean, he has a
Mhm.
really generous outlook on Buddy's behavior. Like he actually also says in that moment where John Trudell's character is complaining about Buddy and being like, "Oh, he's just going to go on like a bender. He's just going to get drunk with this money." And the chairman also says, Buddy's done more for our people than any of you, or like than you can possibly imagine, and but then he also watches as he hears Protector the War Pony like revving up once he gets to the Santa Fe jail. He can hear this commotion outside, and this is like right when Filbert is trying to break Bonnie out to like pull the wall out of her cell. And so the chief is sitting there just kind of waiting to go back and talk to Bonnie. Like the sheriff is going to go back and get her to take her to a room where he can talk to her. And he hears this and he looks out the window and he can see this happening and he knows it's Filbert. And he gets this like smile on his face. And then he just quietly like leaves. And then he gets into his truck. And that's when he kind of follows them as they make their escape, just to make sure that like they can get away, right? He's like, he lets loose a bunch of cattle to stop the cops from following them or to at least delay them. So he's like protecting them very quietly from afar to make sure that they can get away. And because he obviously like supports what they're doing. And even like Filbert breaking her out of jail or Buddy just being his angry self all the time, like both of those versions of warriorhood, like the chief, the tribal chairman or whatever, the Northern Cheyenne tribal chairman, he's got their back regardless, and he has like a kind of a very generous. Um, he's very generous with them, from what I can tell, and so yeah, that's like I think, a different version of Indigenous masculinity. And then there's another one that I hadn't even thought of. I didn't realize that there's like also a minor character who is the mining company's representative, who at the beginning of the film he's like presenting and to the tribal council um all of the benefits of bringing this mine. And he's kind of like, he's just like a conniving figure. You see him kind of in the middle of the movie meeting with an FBI agent, where you kind of find out in their conversation that the whole like Bonnie's arrest is a ploy, right, to get Buddy off of the res so that this vote can go through to allow the mine to go through, up in Lame Deer. And I didn't realize that this guy was native, that this mining rep was native, but Buddy encounters him kind of inexplicably. I'm not really sure why this scene happened. And once they're in Santa Fe, and he beats him up and he calls him an apple. He says something, I didn't write it down. He says something really, really derisive about this character, whose I guess last name was Youngblood, which I don't
Yes,
know.
Sonny Youngblood.
Sonny
He
Youngblood.
says, he says, unlike you, my red doesn't wash off. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this Sonny Youngblood is kind of this buffoon. He gets like run over by the cops when they're running out of the building to try to catch Filbert after he's broken Bonnie out. Like he he's extremely emasculated, I guess is what I'm saying. This Youngblood character. He's like a sellout, or you can just see him and the way that he's written as he's like not he's the antithesis of a warrior, right? He sells out his own people. He like collaborates with the feds. He has, from what you can tell, like really no connection with who he is as an Indigenous person. He's certainly not protecting. He's not defending, like you said, Elena. He's not defending. He's actually working with the enemy. He's a scout. He's basically a scout.
He's a hanging around the fort guy.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
there's also like this version of Indigenous masculinity in the film as well. So all of these different kind of like versions, or not even tropes, they're not even tropes, I don't know. Maybe different tropes or different versions are playing off of each other in rather subtle ways, I would say, throughout the film.
Yeah.
But I would say that's mostly
Yeah.
what the movie is about, is like Native masculinity. Again, like a lot of Native movie. Well, this film wasn't made by a Native person, but like, yeah. And maybe that's because Powwow Highway was the first, kind of genre defining film in Native
I think it really was.
cinema.
And it's interesting, I think, that, like, for instance, I always found it really interesting, and you mentioned this earlier, when Filbert stops and he says Fort Robinson is around here somewhere, and there's that like historical marker, and he goes up there, and and he sees, this is where Dull Knife breaks out of Fort Robinson and heads back to their traditional homelands. And I almost felt like that was a nod to that's literally what the film Cheyenne Autumn was about.
Hmm.
And that was one of those really awful, like next to The Searchers, probably one of the most awful native films done during that time period. Ricardo Montalban played Dull Knife, and they've got this group of Northern Cheyenne who are trying to get home, and they've broken out of Fort Robinson, and yet they filmed it all in Monument Valley. So they're not really traipsing around Nebraska and into Wyoming, Montana in winter, which was actually the route. They're actually in Utah and Arizona, but it looked better on film. So I thought that was kind of a nod to that film, that historical film, in that Buddy has that, or not Buddy, Filbert has that vision where he sees them and they're sort of backlit. The characters are backlit as they're struggling through the snow, and he has those visions throughout the film. The one of the horses when he buys his war pony, and yeah, he's just you can tell he's tuned in. He's got like um, yeah, he's got a different power.
Yeah.
Like there's a power that he has that Buddy has no idea. And Buddy doesn't think that Filbert has anything. But Filbert's got this because he can see this, and he can take those messages and sort of transform them, which I think Buddy's just it's interesting. Like I think Filbert was kind of created. You kind of think, oh, he's slow, he's not really intelligent, he's not really smart. And then there's Buddy, and Buddy is super sharp, and he's very smart, and he works for the tribe, and he's got a position of some authority. And yet by the end of the film you're like, really, no, Buddy's not that bright, and Filbert is really, really bright.
Yep. Wise. It's very wise.
Yeah.
Yep. It doesn't move too quickly through anything. And very brave. Also incredibly
Yep.
brave. Um, and
And he
radical.
grabs, yes, he grabs $4,000 from the police station to make sure that they don't get in trouble with the tribe, that Buddy doesn't get in trouble with the tribe, and to make sure that Rabbit gets her bail money back.
Yeah, no. Because
He doesn't take more than that,
Rabbit is
right?
the white woman friend from Texas of Bonnie, who plays a small role. I don't know. That's who Rabbit is for folks who haven't watched the movie. But so she tries to bail Bonnie out with 2K, and then Buddy has stolen 2K from the tribe basically to fund this trip. And so yeah, Filbert knows that this is the amount that he needs, and so he just takes it. He's just like,
Yeah,
reparations, bitches. He just puts it in his
that's right.
pocket, to help out his friends. And um, so
And he
again,
doesn't take
like,
more,
no, no, he's
doesn't take
just
less, just takes the exact amount.
man in like the contemporary like parlance of movement speak. Like what Filbert does is radical AF. He literally that's called direct action in
Yeah.
this day and
Yep.
age. And
Yep.
so, you have Buddy who's like the caricature of a militant. Um, and then you have Filbert who's just like a down ass warrior. Um,
Yeah.
but it also is like a good man.
Because like, what does Buddy do but get into a fight in a bar?
Yeah, he just
And
breaks shit.
yeah, he just breaks shit and gets into a fight, and then and Rabbit, the character of Rabbit, first of all, is just, I love, because it's the epitome of like a transplanted Santa Fean from Texas with her fur and her jeans and her cowboy boots and her accent and her, I mean, everything about it is like, oh God, I have seen so many people in my life that look just like this. And she comes flying up to try to bail Bonnie out, and she takes charge of the kids. But after Buddy and Filbert and Rabbit go to the bar to have a drink, to try to figure out what they're going to do, um, Filbert leaves to get the kids, and Buddy gets into a fight. So that's what Buddy does. And then they get outside the bar after escaping from possible police because Buddy has beaten up Sonny Youngblood. And of course, Rabbit says, "Oh my God, I love you." It's just like, bah.
Yeah, the white woman is like very turned on by the angry native man.
Yeah, yep,
But
blah.
so yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's what the film is about. And
Yeah,
again, still the character of Filbert, probably one of my favorite native characters, I would say.
yeah,
And
yeah,
native film, the history of native film. Yeah.
yep. I second that
Hell
absolutely.
yes, Gary Farmer.
Yeah.
I want to say one last thing about the Filbert character before we talk a bit here about Graham Greene at the end of this episode. But at one point, Buddy's like pissed off for the umpteenth time at Filbert. And he's like, man, I know you're all blissed out. He's like, you're all blissed out. And I was like, okay, 1989, but I'm so bringing that back. I'm going to start calling people blissed out. He's like, I know you're all blissed out. He's like, but we got shit to do. And then Filbert's like, he just stops. He kind of has this moment because he says he has a lot of these lines. But he's like, we are Cheyenne. All the shit of the world cannot change that. It's something that Buddy says at one point. And I'm just like, hell yeah. Like, that's like,
Yeah.
like that's what a warrior would say. We are
Yep.
Indigenous. Not the shit of none of the shit of the world can change that. And like,
Yep.
this is our source of strength, and our power comes from who we are. And we must
Yep.
remember who we are and embrace that in everything that we do. And yeah, again, just a good character. I can see why this movie created a canon of contemporary native film, for sure. And then to see Gary Farmer and then Wes Studi and John Trudell and Graham Greene in the same film, because 1989, Dances with Wolves comes out in 1992? 1990.
Yeah.
1992.
I think it was 92.
Last of the Mohicans comes out in 1993. Smoke Signals comes out in 1997. I feel like I'm forgetting a movie somewhere in here.
Thunderheart.
Thunderheart comes out in 1992. So within a matter of like a few years afterward, you have all of these. The 90s was like a decade for Native people in film, for sure. It was a standout decade. Even more so, I think, than even like the 2000s and like the 2010s, to be honest. Up until maybe like Reservation Dogs or like Prey, or I don't know, like the stuff that's like much more recent. There's a bit of a dry period. I could be wrong with people who do, maybe there are folks who do like the history of Native film, and there was like a lot of cool shit coming out that I wasn't paying attention to.
No, there was a dry period before Res Dogs and Prey.
Okay, but the
and
90s was like a heyday.
The 90s was a heyday, and I think it was especially poignant to see that Reservation Dogs episode where the four uncles take Cheese out into the woods to go fishing, and they have this sort of moment where it's Gary Farmer, it's Zon McLaren, it's Wes Studi. That's it, right? There was just three of them.
Yeah, it was just them.
Because Graham Greene doesn't show up into Reservation Dogs until the flashbacks, and he's Maximus. But you have all of them on this one show. But that one episode was amazing because they were all together, and we've seen them in so many things, and they've shown up. There was Geronimo too. Geronimo came out in the early '90s, didn't it?
Oh, that's right.
West Studi, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Um, but these are the guys that have been around in all of these roles for so long, and to see them in one place, and then in that particular episode, just being the uncles and being like, we have talked about that show, and their and that um sort of those examples of masculinity, of native masculinity. And I think we even talked about that show at one point. But yeah, it was that was great to see.
Yeah, and I remember us talking about that episode, but also just Res Dogs more broadly. What we really like about that show is that it's self-referential. Like Reservation Dogs references the canon, like all the way
Yeah.
back to Powwow Highway, actually. And so
Yeah.
it reminds us, and maybe this is the first time, maybe like non-native, like the non-native public in the US maybe even realized that there was a canon of Native American film and television, that it actually, there is enough in it that we can like refer back to these moments and these, Easter eggs in all of these films, whether it's like, I didn't know that's why everyone called their car War Pony. I just thought that was like a thing. I just thought that was a thing that like Indians called their cars. But I'm like, oh shit, that's actually from Powwow Highway. Like that's why everyone uses that term, and I didn't even
Yeah.
know that. And so you just taught me that an hour ago in this conversation. And so, right? So like there's all of this, there are all of these important things within the canon. And Powwow Highway is, I don't know. I would be interested to hear. I mean, I'm not an expert on the history of Native film, but Powwow Highway feels like maybe the first or one of the very first. At the very least, it's like a narrative film, like a fictional film. Because there are
Yeah.
like documentaries, like Broken Rainbow came out in 1985 about the struggle against Peabody Coal and forced relocation on Black Mesa. There had been important documentaries about like Wounded Knee that had been produced, but in terms of like film itself and the stuff being like portrayed in like a mainstream film, that did not start, definitely, I would say, until like the late
It didn't.
80s and possibly with this film.
Popular film, and a film that wasn't historical, but a
Oh,
contemporary popular
yes.
film with a
Hmm.
native narrative. This definitely, I think, was one of the first. And yeah, and thank George Harrison.
Not thank
And
George
Philbert.
Harrison. No.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then in the 90s, like, like Last of the Mohicans takes place in like the 18th century, and then like, Dances with Wolves takes place, in the 19th century. So there are these, very famous movies that are about history. But yeah, you're right. Powwow Highway was the first movie that was just about contemporary native life. And the fact that it would talk about resource extraction so critically, the fact that it had an, and a self-awareness about resistance. There was a lot of humor first also.
Yeah.
Filbert was really funny. Filbert had a sense of humor. So there's a lot of humor in the movie. The honesty, I think, especially of Filbert's character, just it had themes in it that were kind of maybe ahead of its time, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it. And
Yeah.
that was really refreshing because even now
Yeah.
you have portrayals of Native people in like the Yellowstone universe that are really stupid. They're really stupid and one dimensional. And it's like this movie came out in 1989 and did a better job, honestly, at like
Yeah.
representing Native people than a lot of the shit that still comes out today. Even though we've experienced like this renaissance over the last 5 years or so, in Native film or Native people in pop culture, I guess. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely, I agree. And you can't beat Filbert for a male character. I mean,
no,
he's fabulous.
I agree. I was surprised that I loved his character so much. Yeah, I really was. For being somebody, I'm not young, but just being of a certain generation and kind of still coming into, like, we've only been doing this podcast for 5 or 6 years, and you know, you and I just like watching movies and TV, and so we're like, hey, let's talk about this shit on this podcast. And so, you know, as we've been recording this podcast, there we have been experiencing this renaissance in
Yeah.
Native people and pop culture, and so I am also of a particular moment in a generation that is probably a bit like biased because of like where I sit historically and where we sit historically. So being able to look back 35 years, over 30, right? Over 35
Yeah.
years, is, and to see something like this, I was like, damn, if this movie was remade and came out in this day and age, it would be a total banger. You know, it would be so relevant and so like on point,
Yep.
where we are right now. I don't know. Hollywood doesn't even know how to make new movies anymore, so they're all just remaking shit from the 90s anyway. So just remake Powwow
Yeah. I
Highway and
mean,
make it dope as fuck.
but keep Gary Farmer.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, that'd be
yeah.
adorable.
I mean, you could find another Buddy Redbow,
Oh,
but
easy.
keep Gary Farmer. Yeah.
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 Well, here, kind of towards the end of the podcast, Elena and I wanted to also do just a very informal retrospective on Graham Greene's career. Of course, Graham Greene, gosh, he passed away, what, a few weeks ago? A month ago? I'm going to look it up.
Yeah. A couple of months ago.
Oh, a couple of months ago. Sorry, you can hear me clicking on my computer. Oh, no. It was a month ago, September 1st, 2025.
A month ago. Okay.
Also,
Yeah, and
Haudenosaunee,
it was
Oneida.
um and he was one of the OGs. I mean, really, um I think most of them were in this film. Oh, also, like, Floyd Red Crow Westerman was the voice of the trucker in Powwow Highway. So when Filbert is on the CB and he hears this voice telling him to go to this place, to Novowus, which ends up being Bear Butte, that's Floyd Red Crow Westerman.
I
That's
knew
his
it.
voice.
I knew it. I was like, is that Floyd Red Crow Westerman?
Yeah. And
Again,
and for
another
those who
like
don't know,
canon moment.
yeah, for those who don't know, that he played the chief Ten Bears in Dances with Wolves. So, like, Powwow Highway really has all of the OGs in it, pretty much. And and it was the first time I'd ever seen Graham Greene, and then, when and he did such an amazing job for the few minutes he was on screen. Then you see him um, in Dances with Wolves, and he was beautiful. I mean, he did an amazing job. We know how we feel about that movie, but he did a great job. He was actually nominated for a Best Supporting Actor Oscar, which he didn't win because Native actors never seem to win anything. But he was amazing. He did a great job in that film, and um, and then you start recognizing him. He became very much um, the native actor that would appear in everything. And then he was in Thunderheart, and he played other roles in other films, smaller roles. But Thunderheart, I think, might have been my favorite, just because you got to see him sort of stretch his skills as an actor and do a little bit of comedy and be kind of, sarcastic. And I just love that character in Thunderheart. um and that one hurt, like, hearing that he had passed. That hurt. It was like, there's not going to be another one.
Yeah, I agree. I he was I'm trying to think of all the films I've seen him in. I didn't get a chance to kind of list them in my mind, but he was like a true actor. Yes,
Yeah.
like very he obviously played native characters, but like you said, like the moment, the minutes, the small amount of time he's on screen in Powwow Highway, he kind of just like steals the movie, actually, because he's so
Yeah.
powerful. And yeah, and Thunderheart, yeah, what an
He stole
amazing
that too,
character.
for
Yeah,
sure.
he totally did. Every scene he was in was just like my favorite. Just like, yeah,
Exactly.
just a really
I
incredible
mean,
actor.
and when you could steal the show from Sam Shepard, who, well, granted, his character was an ass, but it's actually so was Val Kilmer's. But every scene he was in, he stole, and he was amazing.
Yeah. Nope. A true legend, kind of in the history of Native film. And yeah, will definitely be missed. I mean, he hadn't acted for other than what the small appearance that he made in Reservation Dogs. I mean, I hadn't seen him in anything for a very, very long time. But yeah, no. Yep.
And it was really lovely to see all of um, the tributes that came over social media from actors that he had worked with, and actors that um, just respected him and told little stories about what a really good human being he was. And it's always nice to see that he was as genuine in real life as he appears on screen.
Yeah, you didn't hear like creepy stories about him being anything. Um, Pretty private. Like you never heard anything about his personal life, and so yeah, another warrior. I think another portrait um of native masculinity that is definitely worth talking about. And
Yeah,
now I'm remembering Maximus. That wasn't
yeah,
actually a small role. Maximus was like pretty significant in Reservation Dogs, and also just like crazy and eccentric. And again,
yeah.
just his acting chops in that. Like he played that role brilliantly. He stole the show. Like he was probably one
He
of
did
the
again.
best characters in that entire television series. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of wrapped it up. I mean, it was almost like Sterling Harjo and the rest of them waited. Like, we're going to wait 3 seasons to bring in Graham Greene. We're giving you Wes Studi. We're giving you Gary Farmer. We're giving you Zahn McClarnon. So just wait, because we'll give you Graham Greene at the end. And yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the greats for sure. Like
Yeah,
seriously, and not just a native actor, but just like a really, really good artist. Like very
yeah,
good at his craft. I even remember him in Dances with Wolves. He was, I think, he was like everyone's favorite character in Dances
yeah,
with Wolves. I remember watching it even with my family, and like the subtlety with which he played and the
yeah.
humor with which he played that character and like the grace. It was just like, yeah, I think he might be my favorite character. I mean, that movie sucks, but like, um, yeah. So he was always my favorite in like literally everything he was in.
I think really in the funny scenes in Dances with Wolves when he was trying to communicate with Dunbar, with Kevin Costner's character, and um and he's making an earnest effort, Tatanka,
This like
and
iconic
Costner, yeah, Tatanka, and Kevin Costner's just like not understanding, or he's trying to explain coffee, and but the expressions, Graham Greene has these amazing expressions on his face, like, and then at one point, the Rodney Grant character, wind in his hair, says, "Is he crazy, or what?" And Graham Greene's like, "No, I don't think so," but we're not really sure. Yeah, he just had some facial expressions that were unbeatable. I mean, he really, yeah, he embodied whatever he did.
No, like Tatanka is like iconic. We watched that movie. And then everybody
Yep.
did that for years.
Uh-huh.
And my
Yep.
family, we were just like, Tatanka. We would say Tatanka.
We still do that. I mean, we still do that. We
Yes.
like this is the canon. This is the canon. And you know, my pony threw me and now he is dead. And like, you know, I took my car in to get new tires, you know, a few weeks ago, and I said, like, yeah, my pony now has new shoes. I mean, this is the canon that we live with now as Native people. And so, what are you cooking for dinner tonight? Tatanka.
Tatanka. Aw.
So
I don't
thank
know.
you all for
Thank
those
you.
wonderful moments because
Yeah.
um, I think so. My generation, you know, starting with Powwow Highway and on, like actually have a canon now and actually have references that we can use that you know, of course, white people always had, but we finally have this whole long 35 years of things that we can draw from, and it's I think um, a lot of these films were not written by Native people, they weren't directed by Native people, they weren't produced by Native people, but it was the actors themselves who really made these characters and patterned them after, you know, their own experiences, their own lived experiences as Native people, and it's thanks to them, um, and in spite of what might have been bad writing or bad directing, it's because of these actors that we have these moments. So when one goes, when one, you know, walks on, it's a loss.
Wow. Thank you, Che Graham, for everything you did for Native film. And yeah, you are immortalized on screen. Pretty much every Native person knows who you are and will always remember you in that way. Mm-hmm. Um, that's all I got. That's all I got for this.
All I got.
We promised an
You can't.
episode on Chief of War. It is still coming. We had some scheduling issues, but it is still coming. Hopefully that's our next episode. Hopefully that's our next episode.
Yep, we still got to deal with all of those Jason Momoa butts.
I guess, yeah, well, we'll just have a whole section of our next podcast episode about it.
Yep.
More men, more masculinity.
Yeah, I know.
Why? Why is that always what it's about? Anyway, I've ranted about this multiple times. I don't need to go over it. We're already at an hour and 23 minutes. But thanks everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll be back soon. And yeah, have a lovely fall. I'm excited fall is here.